this. Okay. So welcome to our presentation today, which is part of what has been formerly known as the Higher Education Story Series in ABCD, and is broadening a bit to be the ABCD story series, where we share stories from all over about how ABCD is used in different settings. And this time, as you can see, our stories is about an ABCD approach to teaching inside jails and prisons, specifically the Inside Out program at DePaul University, and a halo effect of related programs. So we will be hearing from these folks. As I said, I'm Helen Damon Moore. I'm one of the associate directors at the Stain Center for Community-Based Service Learning. And in the interest of time, I'm going to let each of these other wonderful people introduce themselves as we go through the presentation.
I'm Mindy Couchman.
Mindy,
no, we're not now.
Yeah, we'll wait till we come to you, just because then people can contextualize who you are and what you do in terms of your slides. So you are, like I said, people come to this table either knowing about what we call ABCD more, or about work in detention facilities, or about service learning. And we are all beholden to Jody Kretzman and John McKnight, who created the asset-based community development approach, really identified it in the organically through their work in community as sociologists and researchers at Northwestern University. And those of you who know about ABCD know about the Green Book, building communities from the inside out. And the interesting thing about working in jails and prisons is to think about community in a different way. So we're here to do that today. So this, however, is a presented by Canva, is a representation about this translation to a setting that for most of us is seen as inherently deficit-based. Why do we try to use the glass half full approach that ABCD is based on? And as you know, where we emphasize strengths and capacities over needs, problems, and deficiencies. Again, there are needs, problems, and deficiencies where we're working, but there are also amazing assets from faculty, staff, students, officers, and especially people who are individuals who are incarcerated and re-entering society. So just to sum up how this approach might look, as Kretzman and McKnight originally determined with the community years ago, the left side, the deficit side, really focuses on systems and institutions, on fixing things for people. So in this case, one might say it's all a focus on problems, the problems of carceral institutions, dehumanize people. Yes, these are realities, but if we focus only on those, we can get paralyzed and not do good work. on the control that happens in these situations. Yes, we acknowledge, but we don't get held only to those. By individual responses, we're dealing with just one administrator at a time, one faculty member at a time, one student at a time. No, we're trying to help the community build within, and as people are re-entering and doing research or having jobs outside. Programs are the main answer. And just briefly, on the outside, we have courses that professors Perez and Kalkman will describe, and student Lewin will also describe, and research that are based on relationship building, production of shared knowledge, side-by-side work, community building, opportunity identifying, really finding relationship and joy through all of these different types of activities. And the bottom line, literally here, is people, not programs, are always the answer. Again, we do this through programs and courses, but people are the core of all this work. So I just want to show this slide. If you have done ABCD work, if you're familiar with the Green Book, this is the community asset map. And if you look at this, there are no detention facilities on it. It's really a much happier map than we would say. And Professor Perez is going to refer to a different kind of asset map, but it's very interesting. We haven't recreated this asset map to say that while, again, we may not approve of carceral facilities, they could be on this community asset map, maybe set off to the side. I'm not sure what that would look like. Think about that for yourselves. These slides will be available to all on this call later. And if you want to put any questions in the chat, we might have time to get to a few of them at the end. But I want to get to our presenters in just a second. So while the jails and prisons are off to the side, what we've been working on at DePaul and through a collaborative that involves the education team at Cook County Jail, which is the largest jail in the nation in Chicago, and a group of other institutions that provide education at the jail. And we at DePaul, we are joining what are called association level assets to try to help people move through a systems, or in this case, we're really focusing on education here. This is our, it's not everything to do with people's lives, but as you can see, the large focus for DePaul is under the orange list. These are things that we're trying to help people access and to develop community around. And inside, it's not as easy as walking to your neighbor, but it might be walking to your cellmate or gathering in a think tank opportunity or a writing group opportunity. So I'm going to flip past that again. We have these slides will be available. You're welcome to ask any questions. So these are little people walking through paths. Again, it's not just individuals, but it is about people who are getting education at various, they may enter at various points. Some go into jail with a GED. Others have master's degrees. Others have an 8th grade education. So we're trying to help people pick up where they start and move ahead to the greatest extent of their capacity to end up with jobs and housing. And now I want you to think about, just have in the back of your mind, what are assets that you and related partners at the individual, community, association, or institutional level could bring to social justice work around detention. And that is my part of the presentation, except this part. When we go inside, students go in 12 outside I'm going to let Javier share how this works with students. But my great graphic artist, Amy, was kind enough to do those slides that you just saw, and to take pictures of the t-shirts that all our students and faculty wear when they go in, so that we too wear uniforms like the students who are inside, who are also earning academic credit from DePaul when, even though they are incarcerated, when they are taking our courses, and they have to wear khaki or orange or blue uniforms and scrub looking outfits. And so we wear the same, all the same t-shirts to be in solidarity. So here is Professor Javier Perez. And Javier, could you introduce yourself and the courses that you teach and your collaborative research? And just let me know when you want to switch slides.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time. My name is Javier Perez. I am a faculty member here in the Department of Criminology at DePaul University. I come to the space because I was fortunate enough to be one of the co-founders of the criminology program. So we try to envision, what does justice look like out beyond its retributive nature that we traditionally assume in American society. You know, it's really trying to think about a justice in which we incorporate the voices of people most marginalized in our society. So I think I say that, and I also say I come to the space as somebody who is just as impacted. Like in my childhood, I used to get into some trouble. So I find that my personal experience coupled with my professional experience in graduate school have really put me in a position to sort of connect with individuals and to sort of advocate and push for this idea of centering the inside voice. So when I think about this reclaiming space, I think about this opportunity in which we have in many ways demonized incarcerated populations, right? Many of us do not really think about these individuals beyond their worst, maybe mistakes in life, right? For the remainder of their life, this is the one thing that defines them. And so by only focusing on the negative of it, in many ways, we dehumanize them. And we do not really think about the contributions that they would have in society. That is just something so far-fetched to think that these could be productive contributing members, right? It's just not the way that we sort of otherize this certain population. So in many ways, when we think about reclaiming space, it's in some ways you think about a liberatory space. I mean, it's kind of difficult to imagine, but some of the more maybe abolitionist type conversations that we could have could take place within a prison, right? This sort of utopia that we envision, it's the conversations are taking place there because the institution forces you to imagine a world in which would be free of these institutions, but also a world in which it wouldn't rely, like our relationships to each other would not rely on the exploitation of certain people in our society. So when we think about reclaiming space and the potential for prison education to do so, it really is an opportunity for incarcerated voices to assume control over their agency and to start demonstrating their potential and their worth, which I will speak to in a moment. So you could make the argument that education then becomes a politically active point of resistance, right? When you think about marginalized communities, particularly communities of color, many of them are sort of in this racial hierarchy that exists. They find themselves at the bottom. And in the power structures, they find themselves almost just at the whims of whatever the dominant power structure might be. And so that education becomes as a tool of resistance to really fight back against sort of the oppressive institutions that they come across. And the ability for them to master, as mentioned by Helen, the ability for them to secure bachelor's degrees, master's degree, then they become sort of experts in these areas in which they really have then embraced the promise of education to provide them with these liberatory spaces in which they could challenge systems of oppression. So that's, I think, what I always preface my discussion is that I think about prison education and the opportunity to tap into these populations as the potential to kind of politically be resistant against the system that always assumed you to be criminal or always regards you to that sort of identity. Can we go to the next slide? Helen, please. Okay, so how is this space developed? It is through the Inside Out Prison Exchange program that we have here at DePaul University. It is an international program, and I certainly encourage you to explore and see if maybe you might be a facilitator or instructor. It is open to universities, but in my training, I also had professionals, practitioners who were there as well. So it's open to anyone who could really see this vision through. And what it allows for us to take 12 outside students. So those are my students that I would have in my classes. And then we enter this space inside the prison in which the prison then gives us 12 students. And what you have is this mix of an amazing set of brilliant minds. One of the things I always ask my inside students to demonstrate is to just at least share the degrees that they have. Because again, like maybe some of the assumptions that we have about these populations, we just don't really think about them as being educated. But if the opportunities are present, then they will certainly take advantage of it. And so, as Amelia will be able to attest, I sort of give my outside students a warning that, you know, when you walk into that space, be ready to sort of be challenged, not only from the physical barriers that are there, but be ready to be challenged intellectually because I mentioned and give a warning to my outside students, be ready to be exposed because whatever has worked for you up to this point, you're obviously a great student, an A student, but that idea of maybe you just kind of providing some sort of one or two commentary during a class discussion has worked up to this point. But the inside students always remind them, okay, that's what the author said, or okay, that's what the textbook said. What do you really think? And that's kind of a challenging sort of experience for my outside students because they haven't really been challenged to think for their own. They just become really good at maybe regurgitating or kind of restating somebody else's ideas, which is why they become A students. But to be in that space in which you are being really challenged to think about, okay, what is it? How would be your vision to really think about how we could solve some of the issues around society, particularly that lead to incarceration? So I really do think some questions that I'm often asked is, they're like, Javier, do you dumb down the material when you teach in this class? And I can tell you, for anyone that has attended graduate school, the type of academic rigor and integrity that takes place in institutions, I've never experienced that at the undergraduate level as a professor. The only other time I've ever experienced something similar like that is in graduate school, when all of us are challenging and pushing our academic potential to the max. Because for many of the inside students, this is what they have, right? This is what they look forward to. So they've read the material, they thought about it up and down, left and right. So they are prepared. And so when our students come, the outside students come in there and they're not prepared to have these conversations, they're essentially just going to be exposed because they're just not prepared. And so what it does is it really just elevates the sort of academic integrity that is present there. And when we speak about transformative, I know transformative is sort of loosely tossed around as a concept. The only thing I could find that is maybe remotely close to this inside out experience would be a study abroad experience. When anyone has ever traveled abroad, your worldview perspective might not be completely transformed, but it certainly has shifted as you see a different way of living. And I think that's about as close as I can to describe what this experience does to you. The ideas of connecting with people is just so incredibly different inside of a prison. I'll say this one point and then I'll move on to the next slide. One of the learning objectives when you're dealing with incarcerated populations is to really break down those walls. And so when we think about, like in my regular classes, like it'd be great if students get to know each other and collaborate with each other, develop these networks, but that's not a learning objective. That's not necessary. Because when you're teaching inside, you're trying to break down these walls. The learning objectives become to develop trust with people. And at the end of 10 weeks of working on these sort of activities in which you're building trust and relationships, it's bound to have an impact on you. So the type of relationships that you build with people on the inside and that your students develop as well, it's just it's incredibly profound. And that, again, I would say is probably unlike any other class because it's just not the learning objectives of any other class. Can we move to the next one? Ellen, please. Okay, so what do I do? I've had the opportunity to teach at both our county jail and also at Statesville, which is the maximum security prison here in Illinois that just closed. So the best way I could ever describe Statesville, and Amelia will attest to this, is like Shawshank. It really is. Like if you've ever watched Shawshank, it is exactly like that with the doors and the loud banging, a place that is really meant to just torture the soul. It's torturing the body, absolutely, but the lack of educational programs that are there, the lack of just creative space that is there, it is really the one I think about. Whatever purposes we had for prisons, it is a manifestation of that in terms of punishment and retribution. So I've had the opportunity to teach in both institutions. The positives are certainly out of the county jail is that it's close, and so the positives I find in teaching prisons is that those individuals in Illinois, we abolished the parole in 1978, as Amelia will speak to. So as a result, people are there. Like in Illinois, when you're sentenced to life, you will serve life in Illinois. Unfortunately, we're an incredibly punitive state. And so like for those individuals, we're working together for years on end, again, developing these very sort of just powerful and intimate relationships with people that you're humanizing, right? I think one of the sort of attributes when you think about ABCD is about this idea of humanizing people that have been marginalized all of their life. And so that's what I see take place. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so I'm going to speak about briefly about what we do in an ABCD framework in one of my classes. Is essentially this is what we did in the Cook County Jail. When we met as a class, and I was thinking about like what project to sort of have everyone work together, what ABCD was like paramount in my mind. And I thought, okay, why don't we center the inside voice? Again, thinking about the ways, if we look at the potential of communities and we look at the potential of this specific community, to me, then I think about, okay, what's their potential for social policy? And so what we did is we went and had the inside students speak about the communities that they came from. We centered them as the experts. Most of the time when we think of experts, we think of academics or maybe practitioners, but we never think about people who are incarcerated as experts in any space, right? But when you think about it, they're the experts in their communities. And so we centered the inside voice. We allowed them to tell us what were the needs of their communities. And in doing so, what we did is we identified gaps in their communities. We saw where there were needs, and then we overlaid it with asset maps. Can we go to the next slide, Helen, please? So this is essentially what the project was. The project was for them to identify communities throughout the city, identify the needs, and then identify the services that were available. And as you can imagine, there were lack of services that were available. We sort of spoke about service deserts in many of these communities, that people had to travel miles on end outside of their neighborhoods to seek some of these mandatory services that were assigned to them as a result of probation. And so the department, the county jail was so interested in this project, they actually wanted to hear what the students came up with. And that's really when I thought about like the sort of benefit of thinking of this population as an asset and think about the communities that they come from. By us allowing the inside voice to be experts and to kind of narrate the sort of decisions about what are the solutions, then we will arrive at something that maybe as outsiders that we're not just intimately involved with. Can I go to the next slide? I also want to be respectful of the time that we have. So I will conclude with this idea that the last thing that I've had the privilege of doing with my inside students is publish with them. Again, I don't think when we think about creating knowledge, I think in many ways when we conduct studies of incarcerated populations, we think about them as almost like the subjects, maybe if a zoo, if you will, that we go in there with this voyeurism into these prisons and then kind of take note as sort of anthropologists and then document, right, what we see of people in their natural habitats, almost very way like a zoo, you would feel. And so what I did with my students is challenge all of that and just say like, hey, what if we centered the inside voice as producers of knowledge? Again, reclaiming space of education in a liberatory way that it completely just throws out the window all of our assumptions that we have about incarcerated populations, because those assumptions were built and developed by outsiders, right? When we allow the inside voice in this space to really be the creators of knowledge, then we arrive at different type of conclusions and different type of solutions. So I think that's all I wanted to conclude on. I'm just here highlighting some of the work that I've been able to publish, and then I will defer the floor to our next presenter. So we could go to the next slide, Helen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm Amelia Lewin. I'm a 2025 senior graduate of DePaul University. I'm a criminology major. I guess I'll start off by saying that photo that you see on the screen is taken from Dr. Perez's Inside Out course a year ago at Stateville Correctional Center. And as he mentioned, it was an absolutely moving experience, and I definitely recommend everyone to get involved if you can. It definitely embodies the whole ABCD initiative's power by kind of showcasing how coming together into the room and the power of knowledge, experience, and resilience can really make the assets of people within the prison community flourish. As Helen mentioned earlier, we often talk about prison communities as sort of their deficits and barriers and problems. But during this course, we shift that mindset into talking about how there's a ton of strengths, talents, and capabilities of incarcerated individuals, and those transformative powers lead to great milestones. For example, we presented at those 3 conferences listed on the screen: the Inside Out 25th year anniversary, the American Society of Criminology, and the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences. Here, the incarcerated individuals actually informed professionals on really critical topics such as like deterrence, criminality, language, and community bonds. So their experiences firsthand in the criminal justice system can definitely inform people who have worked with this sort of content for years, but just never talked one-on-one with someone who directly experiences the problems of our system. And these achievements really highlight how education can empower individuals and really implement changes in society that we want to see. I've never taken a course at DePaul that was as moving as this. And then a powerful example, I would say, is Parole Illinois. We can go to the next slide. That's a nonprofit founded by two incarcerated individuals at Stateville Correctional Center. I've had the pleasure of working with them for about a year now. And through their efforts, their knowledge, they helped actually shape policy proposals. They have 4 House or Senate bills that are currently actively being talked about on the floor. And this even inspired the Illinois Senator Rachel Ventura to create a legislative internship program within Stateville Correctional Center, which is something we've never seen before, having someone from the legislation actually come inside and work with the inmates. So the talents and strengths of incarcerated individuals extend way beyond the legal system. So I kind of wanted to highlight that they find pleasure in working in art, literature, podcasting, movies, music, anything more than that. For example, the Walls Turn Sideways art exhibit was funded by Parole Illinois, and it showcases works of art that were created by incarcerated men whose stories they feel like could really resonate deeply with broader communities. And then additionally, the Students Against Incarceration is a DePaul club that basically, as the name suggests, fights for decarceration. And they created a book club inside of Cook County Jail, which totally, to me, embodies the asset-based learning, and they foster critical discussions on topics like humanity, discrimination, friendship, and peace. This was mentioned earlier, but while we could all read the same book, everyone has a different meaning to what resonates with them. So coming together and talking about how our different experiences can influence these topics is really important. So I guess to close out, recognizing these achievements is really crucial in understanding our community. America has the largest incarcerated community, and it's sad that we don't place more effort on the education to them. So I guess I'll end on a positive note and say let's continue to support and uplift these contributions and get involved with incarcerated communities however you can, because as an undergraduate student, it really transforms my knowledge of the incarcerated system, the legal system, and only empowers me to want to make more change. So thank you.
Thank you, Javier and Amanda and Amelia. We're so pleased, and a community develops also around folks who do this work and work side by side. And so Amelia has been she has engaged in this work with all of us on this call and many inside Stateville and at Cook County. And it's just really beautiful to see people working together, either to deal with what's happening or to work with social change to express themselves in many ways. And another way is to do math, also an inside out course. And Professor Mindy Kaltman, could you take it from here?
Yes, or my heart is racing, and I've had Amelia in a different course, and she really is who she's portraying her to be, even herself, even outside of the carceral setting. And then every time Javi opens his mouth, I have like a million new directions I want to take, because I learn every day from him. Anyway, so yes, my name is Mindy Kelchman. I'm a professor in the College of Education at DePaul. I'm just putting in the chat right now something that I put into my syllabus. And what I want to highlight here is that the last sentence of this inside out praxis, which is, we are always looking to address issues of social concern. And people think, how do you do that with math? That's like, this is the only inside out math kind of class in the country we understand. And so I know. And so how does this work? Next slide, please. So the reason I even came to this was I'm a cognitive psychologist, which means I study how people learn, and I do that in the context of math. And why math? Because math tends to be the thing that we as a society think of people as being smart if they can do math. If you can't do math, then often you come away feeling like I'm not good enough, or I can't do what my teacher tells me, which Javi's already talked about. There's a lot of what we call parroting, right? Doing what you're told, doing what you're shown. And if you don't have that kind of memory, or maybe you're not interested in it, chances are you're not going to succeed. You don't succeed in math. You're not good enough in school. And math itself becomes very disenfranchising. And I noticed that in our DePaul honors population, which I often teach. I noticed it in my teacher education population, which I often teach. I've noticed it in every population. And the more, as DePaul, we're very interested, the College of Education, we're about urban education. And what you learn from the literature in urban education is the expectations of urban students are so low that, you know, we don't even give people a chance to show how smart they are and to bring their assets into the classroom. So when I was told about the Inside Out program, I'd been thinking for many years about, boy, if only we could get people feeling like they can do all this stuff for themselves and that they are smart, we could start shifting the tides, the winds, whatever the saying is. If you look at standard curriculum in school for math, it is so uninviting to anybody, but particularly for people who can't relate or connect to problems about jetting off on spring break to somewhere, all the things that, you know, you're not finding in communities in some of the underserved neighborhoods. So I started working on this program, this course. Took 2 years, Helen, I think, to get this done. It was not an easy thing because it doesn't appear to be a social justice kind of thing. But I'm going off script a little bit. And that's because of something that Javi said. And when he talked about telling outside students that you need to be prepared to be challenged, I'm in the middle of teaching this course and I can't not follow that up with an experience that we just had that I think pulls this all together. So half of my students, just over half, are honor students. And one week I noticed a student getting very upset with herself, like almost to tears, because she couldn't solve the problem we were doing. And like Javi, I do not dumb anything down. In fact, all of the math problems I use in our course come from my dozen or so years of co-teaching with a career mathematician from DePaul. And we worked for about that amount of time with pre-K to grade 12 teachers, helping them better understand how to teach math for understanding and not just repetition. And so this was a hard problem they were working on. And so I reached out to the student afterwards and I said, I can see you're frustrated. I'm not sure if it would help, but maybe you could take a step back and see that while you became frustrated with yourself for not working faster, the guys are learning and appreciating their patience and willingness to spend time on a problem and not give up. The developing perseverance, patience, and persistence is inevitably going to close the gap that likely existed in the beginning. So I don't think you're slowing down. I think your students, your inside students, they're catching up. And that was really hard for her to see, that she was comparing herself. I can't do this faster. And she wrote back to me, when I felt like I couldn't solve the problem quick enough, I couldn't, and I wasn't accomplishing more. It was frustrating for being stuck. But after I realized I was holding on to, Helen, you're going to love this, some unhealthy deficit-based habits, I was trying to work with the mindset of trying to finish fast rather than realizing it's okay to take my time and work things out. I've always struggled with vulnerability, letting myself open up and accept help in difficult situations, but I feel I'm getting more comfortable with asking for help. And that was really a breakthrough in a lot of this. So what happens is they do these problems together, they talk about it, they see how they have different perspectives. Nobody is better at math than anybody else in that room. Next slide. So what what do students say about this? And just to give you a little structure of the class, we come in, we do an opening, usually a social question, something fun like if you could be friends with a superhero, who would it be? You know, things like that. And then we go on to what I call perceptual problems, and they're problems that have no right answer. It's just how you see it. And they always want DePaul student, or the outside students always want a right answer. And I know Amelia did some of these with me, but they always want a right answer. Whereas inside guys are going, well, there's lots of ways you could look at this problem, right? Who says there's a right answer? And so that's a real education. And then I have some literature that we work on together, and we talk about what the literature in education and learning and math learning and urban education says. Some of my favorites are about an article, it's literally called this, what students have to check at the door before they walk into classrooms about their identities and what's not welcome in a classroom. And this is specific to urban environments. So this is what the students say at the end. We learn that math can be collaborative and interdependent. It's only collaborative and interdependent, by the way, if you talk to actual mathematicians. It's not what you do in school. We applied the math we did to our past experiences in the real world and leveraged our unique experiences. We learned the value of a non-judgmental environment. Almost everybody comes out with, it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to be wrong in public. And as long as you're wrong in public, you can ask for help, and everybody has something to bring to this party, and who can help me get unstuck. And I've seen that happen repeatedly now. We don't even like notice inside, outside students, like who's stuck, who needs help. That's all there is. And I actually ask students, who are the leaders in this group? When I give you a hard problem, who starts it? And without fail, they said, we all are. Group leadership was fluid, organic. Whoever has the first idea, that's where we start. And then we go from there. There's kind of nobody looks to anybody else as the leader who's got their juices spinning. And finally, we developed new strengths-based, community-oriented mindsets regarding math and working together. We found a new openness to new perspectives and ideas, lost our fear of failure, and kept trying as we identified strengths and weaknesses, not only in our strategies, but among us as individuals. Okay, next slide. So how does this come back to social justice? When everybody is treated as smart, students feel smart and see smartness in others, regardless of their circumstances. A new community of interdependent advocacy and achievement is developed. Participants take away a new understanding of themselves, those they may have previously judged, and the carceral system overall. And they all come in with assets and challenges, and left with new assets they'll continue to develop. So next slide. This is an example of a final project, and I'm just going to tell you what goes into this. Students are asked to represent in some way. They work in groups of 3 or 4 or so, and they're asked to highlight an article, something that came out of the literature that really impacted their view of themselves and others in terms of what it means to be good at math. They have to choose one of these problems that has no right answer, and how did they talk about it? And then we have very difficult math problems that I learned from Lynn Narasimhan, my mathematician friend, and those are usually, we spend at least an hour and 15 minutes working in groups on these larger problems, so they have to represent that and how they work through it. And then they have to include a reflection piece on giving an explanation of how they felt they met the goals of the course and of the Inside Out program. So both of those have to be addressed. And they make these amazing, amazing collaborative posters. And that's, you can't really see them, but that's what they're about. Next slide. I think that's it. I wanted to leave a few minutes. I will give another sort of anecdote about the social justice piece in this. So one of my goals of this has been this piece that bothers me, that a lot of the urban communities, other people come in to solve their problems. And that includes their accounting, things they want to build, things that they want to do to make their communities better and safer. And that's what they want. And I want to empower and give agency to at least the math piece of it, that you don't need other people doing your accounting. You don't need other people to figure out how much paint you need to paint your recreation center. You don't need other people to figure out how much wood you need to build a deck around something. And so those are the kinds of problems that we do, and they can do it however they want. And so when I first told them, we're going to talk about using math for social justice and making your own decisions in your own community, the first thing one of the inside students said is, well, you have to be our voice. Nobody's going to listen to us. And I said, so let's start with the what if scenario. What if you could have your voice? How would you use this math to make change? And I mean, I'm getting chills just thinking about what came out of these discussions. So that's how it comes together. And like I said, it's the only one like this. It was a sell to the Inside Out program, the woman Lori Pompa. How is math inside out? And it just, to me, it just excites me. And like Amelia said, I just wish so many people would experience this. And I've met the most wonderful people and have, you know, new best friends in Javi and Helen. And you know, it's been, for an old lady like me, it's been a real like fire under my career at this point. It really makes a difference. Students aren't there to get a grade. We're there for the A. They're there because it matters. So that's it.
That's a really important point, that you have the assets of the education team at Cook County Jail, where we've done much of this teaching, the faculty and students and staff and especially individuals inside who really want to do this, because there are many barriers. And so it's not like sailing into a class that you have to teach or take. So thank you so much to our presenters. I want to also acknowledge Jen Kuba, who is the new Assistant Director of Partnerships for ABCD. Welcome, Jen, to your role. And you'll seeing Jen in other contexts. You're all welcome to all ABCD events, and she'll be, I think, the person one of the people who's sending you all kinds of information about those activities. So I think we have time for a couple of questions or comments. And certainly do, if we can record the chat. I'm not sure how that works. I'm not good at tech. Tech is not one of my assets, but questions, comments, follow up on what you've heard. Are you doing this work yourself? Has it been rewarding, or we regularly find it frustrating and obnoxious to deal? I mean, again, there are many barriers by definition, but there is also this rich positive stuff that you've heard. So anybody want to come in?
I'm going to put my email in the chat. I think that because we're not going to be on here long enough for me to keep the chat and do that. But, you know, I would love more people to be bringing this kind of work to their regions and what they're doing. And, you know, as much as I'm constantly annoying the chair of our math department, who's coming again on Friday to my last class, because I want something like this to come out of the math department too, because they are hungry for it. And getting more and more of that is in everything, you know, everything Javi talks about the importance of, you know, community, because that community map, we could put like a math skill in every one of your areas, right? Every place that you take that map, we can put where you can use STEM skills and how you can take back. You talk about take back control over that and not be reliant on outsiders to come in and do the work for you.
And this can be happening in youth detention facilities. There are many different types of programs. So Jen is giving us the 3.5 minute sign here. Last notes, comments, questions, burning thoughts. very happy to hear. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I know there's a lot of inside out facilitators here with us today, but maybe Mindy or Dr. Perez can share how they got involved or what some of the steps are. Might be helpful for folks.
And as they do that, I'd like to point out that Jen herself has is an inside out faculty member as well, which is one of the many reasons she was hired for her position. So we're very lucky to have her do this in peace studies on homelessness, which is an amazing course. So we'll teach 8 courses at Cook County Jail this year and have just are cutting the ribbon on 2 computer labs that are being, which are really rooms with a few computers. They're not fancy schmancy, but anyway, yes, Javier, how did you get involved?
You know, I had first heard about Inside Out through other colleagues. And I would say personally for me, you know, it was like one of those things that was just like a natural. Like I knew, you know, there's just some opportunities that come across your path in your professional career that you're just like, I need to be there. And that's what being a criminologist and understanding like some of the great reformers of the past. This, as soon as the first prisons were constructed, there were always these progressive professors, like at community colleges, that just taught there, like in the very first early years of prisons in America. And so for me, I feel incredibly fortunate to walk in those footsteps. So I was fortunate to be able to train in California and with the support of the Stain Center here at DePaul to just kind of be welcomed into that space. So I would say, you know, I think for me personally, there's an incredible connection because, as I mentioned, I'm justice impacted as part of my history. And so it allows me to advocate for those voices that are absolutely silenced and discarded in society. So I'll just end there.
So you can imagine my path was not so direct, right? I don't work in criminology and I don't have that same history, but I have a colleague, Chris Worthman, who is in the College of Education and was teaching school to prison pipeline course in there, which we focus on in the College of Ed. And he introduced it to me knowing I'd already been working in the community with little kids for helping them develop math skills that they were so far behind when they came to school. So he introduced it to me. And like Javi said, once you hear about it, she's like, how do I join that? How do I get into it? It was March 13th of 2020 that I was supposed to go, which was the day that COVID hit. And I just started working with Helen, and the same thing Javi said. But I did my inside out training online through Temple. They were not yet back in person. It's a lot. It's 42 hours over 6 days, you know, get some snacks. And, but I mean, it is as empowering as Amelia talks about being in the class, it's that empowering being part of the training. And because we are trained by formerly incarcerated people, those are our teachers. There's a facilitator from Temple, but everybody else is somebody who's been incarcerated and is coming from firsthand what we need in prisons and jails. And then I got to workshop my class with them because it was brand new. It was something that had never been done before.
So we need to finish up, but to honor time, but I do want you to think about the note on the last slide, which was thank you for being here. And please do follow up. We are very interested in sharing our knowledge on an ongoing basis. There's so much more to say. And so if you are doing similar work or know people who are, we're really happy to share what we've done and of course to learn from what you all are doing. But also the story series is broadening a little bit from a higher education story series, which this is part of what DePaul has done in an education setting that is different from our usual, to a story series more. And so we want, ABCD is all about sharing stories. And we will pick up again in January, I believe, around a story and using ABCD approaches in trauma work. And at the grassroots level, related to trauma, I'm coordinating, which means I'm just taking the riches and now working with Jen and Allison and Jess and ABCD and putting some wheels under what goes on. So please stay in touch with ABCD and share your story ideas. If you're doing something good, which you all are, we want to hear about it and share it in this kind of very low-key format. So thank you so much for being here and for your support of the asset-based, strengths-based approaches and for listening to it in a really what we found to be a really interesting environment. So, okay. So have a good rest of your day, everyone. Appreciate it. And it was great to see you. Take care.